Hello, Shiver Seekers. Are you ready to follow us into the unknown? I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Bart.
And you have found the Dark Oak. Today we continue with part 2 of the disappearance of David Sneddon. Officials have said he perished in the Tiger Leaping Gorge, but there have been many reports that he is still alive. We're going to tell you what we know, and you decide.
This should be an interesting one.
Welcome to the Dark Oak, the mystery podcast with purpose. Each month, through our charity, the Branch of Hope Foundation, we give a portion of earnings from our Patreon and sponsors to a nonprofit organization related to the first episode of the month. To find out more information, head to our Instagram account, The Dark Oak Podcast, our website, thedarkoak.com, or stay to the end of the episode and we will give you all of the details. Okay, Bart, part 2. Have you had any more time to think about part 1?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's sort of a very unsatisfactory result if you are his parents, and I'm certainly interested to hear the theories or possibilities of what may have happened.
Yeah, absolutely. If you have not listened to part 1, please go and do so. I also want to encourage you to go check out those maps that I provided on our Instagram account. Again, it's the Dark Oak Podcast. They're behind the cover photo that says Tiger Leaping Gorge trekking maps. They are so helpful in retracing David's steps because, as I'm telling you where he was and where there were eyewitness accounts and sightings and where we think he made it versus where he may have disappeared from, I use a lot of cities and landmarks, and these maps really help to kind of cement it in your head. Now, one is a hand-drawn map, which to me is very helpful in finding the landmarks. The other map is produced by ChinaDiscovery.com, and it's really helpful in providing elevations and travel times and things like that. So if you have the ability, print them or pull them up on your phone so you can listen as we go through the episode. And then also, if you haven't gotten through part 1, go listen to that and then come back to this episode.
Yeah, I found the maps very helpful, so definitely check them out.
Yeah. Now, before we proceed, I do want to give a little blurb about our 100th episode celebration and giveaway. Our 100th episode is coming up. I think this is episode 98 right now, so it's just around the corner. And to celebrate, we are releasing 2 episodes every week in April and May. So this is our scheduled episode for Wednesday, which is when we always release. And of course, part 1 was released at the end of last week. That means 99 is going to come on Friday, and that our 100th episode is going to be released on Wednesday. To celebrate further, we are doing a giveaway. You can hop onto our Instagram account and see the prizes for our giveaway, and they are so cute. One is a candle that says, "This smells like chloroform." Just kidding. A little JK. It's vanilla and lavender. And then the grand prize, at least I think it would be, is what has been described as a wristlet with our logo on it, and it says, "Shh, I'm listening to my favorite mystery podcast." Bart has been very eloquent in describing how to use a wristlet. Just kidding. He said, "What the heck is a wristlet?" But it's like a to-go bag, right? It's like a cute little canvas zipper bag. So, I mean, obviously for us girly girls, we could do some makeup in there, but it also would be great as a little bag to take in your car. I suppose you could make it more masculine, and I could say it would be great for screws or bolts, springs. Bric-a-brac.
That's not factual.
You could use it for that. You could. What would you use it for? If you were lucky enough to receive this wristlet, what would you use it for?
I would give it to you.
Oh, okay. Well, that kind of avoided the question, but also that's very nice.
Well, I suppose you could put money in it.
How about you put money in it before you give it to me? I would really like that. Let's work on that. I think I have an extra one back there somewhere.
Yeah.
The episode after this, we are going to go live on our Facebook page and find a few winners. And I will tell you there will be more than one, probably more than 3. maybe even more than 5. I don't know. We're just going prize crazy over here. And it's so easy to enter. Head to our Instagram account, hit the follow button, find any post that you like, leave us a comment, then go wherever you like to listen, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, leave us a 5-star review, send us a message, and let us know you did it. That's it. That's super easy.
It sounds very easy.
I am still waiting for your submission, even though, what is it the attorney say? That wouldn't be like an arm's length transaction, or you're not an eligible party because you live within the household. I feel like you would have an unfair advantage.
Conflict of interest.
There it is. There it is. That's why we keep you around, babe. So please go do those things. More than anything, we just want to celebrate with you. And we're doing that by giving you extra content, by showing you extra love, and just making our community even better. All right. While we're on the subject of Instagram, I also wanted to remind everyone that every episode we release, we compile what we call episode extras that get posted on our Instagram account. They go live the same time that the episode goes live. So as soon as you see that episode, that information will be available on our Instagram account. Most of it is photos. It could be photos of victims, their families, a crime scene, sketches, suspects, whatever we think will add to your understanding of the case. We also release videos, audio clips, info on, say, petitions. I'm going to share some of that info today in our episode. So it's super easy to navigate. Hop over to Instagram. You'll see a cover photo that references this episode. So this is going to be episode 98, David Sneddon. You click on that, and then under that cover photo are all the photos that relate to this case, including a little summary of the case itself. So go take a look at it while you're there looking for your maps. Okay, well, I feel like that's been a lot of business today. Let's get down to the case.
All right, let's do it.
Now, the last we heard of David's story, there was a confirmed sighting of David on August 11th, the day he disappeared. A local guide named Keith Chu Chung was traveling with a married couple from Hong Kong, heading from west to east. And as they were walking, they came upon a white Westerner who looked, spoke, and dressed like David. The man courteously asked the trio in perfect Mandarin if he could join on their hike. Pleased to have the company of a friendly hiker, the couple said yes. The guide said they would take turns speaking in both English and Mandarin, which gave each side a chance to practice their non-native language. According to Keith Chu Chung, the group traveled together for hours, reaching Tina's guest house at 10 p.m. And this is the witness account that I gave you at the end of part 1, which to me seems pretty compelling. This seems like someone who didn't just see him in passing, but actually spent time with David. I believe when he tells the Sneddons, he was with David.
It certainly sounds like a credible witness.
And if we believe this witness is credible, that would mean something pretty significant, which is that he made it out of the gorge and made it all the way to Tina's guest house, which contradicts what the Chinese authorities have been reporting to the Sneddons. So already there's a little bit of complication, a little bit of friction between what the Sneddons are hearing, seeing, feeling, and what they're being told. Now, according to this guide, the next morning, David continued alone up the route towards Shangri-La. And that's the last time he saw him. Keith said he was positive that this man was David because an American who speaks Korean, Mandarin, and English is very memorable. After the Sneddons spoke with Keith, they found 9 more people who they felt were credible eyewitnesses. And remember, they had that very strict way of narrowing down eyewitnesses that they felt added value. They would start out by saying, did you meet a white guy that speaks Chinese? If the person they were talking to said yes, they would ask them to physically describe the person they saw. If that passed, then they would go on to the next step of asking the person to describe what this person they saw was wearing or carrying. And then if that passed, they would pull out more photos of David and have a real conversation or interview, if you will. These are not fly-by-night people. And the fact of the matter is, it's not like the Sneddons were handing out like rewards or something. You know, we hear that a lot, that people will give false accounts because they want to include themselves in a case to give themselves some kind of notoriety, or maybe there is a reward or something like that. There was none of that here. These were people that genuinely seemed interested in help, and based on the perseverance of the Sneddons, so Roy, David's father, and then Michael and James, David's brothers, they were really just kind of pushing this up the hill.
Yeah, and it sounds like they were handling it in a very almost professional manner, as you noted in the first episode. That just the way they questioned people is a good way to get accurate information.
I agree. Way more sophisticated than I would have been. I should be good at this. They're better than I would be, for sure. Now, after receiving the news that David had made it to Tina's guest house, the Sneddons headed to Tina's guest house. And they must have been feeling very hopeful to receive news that David had made it to the guest house, because according to Chinese law, hotels and guest houses are required to keep a written log of foreign visitors, including names and passport numbers. So it would be great to confirm to the Chinese officials that David had not fallen in the gorge. If they can prove, based on the front desk sign-in sheet, that David was here, that meant he made it out. So he couldn't have perished the way the Chinese officials are saying he did. When the Sneddons explained to the workers at the front desk why they were there and asked to see the logbook, they were told the police had already been there and confiscated the logbook. Tina's guest house no longer had any guest information for the entire month of August. As a matter of fact, after stopping at a few guest houses, the Sneddons realized that the police had confiscated the check-in paperwork for every single lodge along the trails. To this day, David's family has never been able to see the paperwork. If the Sneddons weren't suspicious of a muff investigation before, they certainly are now.
Yeah, muffed or willingly covered up.
You could go either way. I don't think they were assuming wrongdoing on the part of the Chinese. They felt they were just being lackadaisical about it. But I think at this point in their minds, they had to be wondering.
Wait a minute. Okay,
what's going on here?
Just quickly walk through the logic of it. So, a hiker goes missing. They don't know where he is. And let's just play it out as if the Chinese officials, what they said is the truth. He went on a hike. He fell. He went in the gorge, whatever. He had some kind of accident that resulted in his death and his body not being found. Nobody's at fault. There's nobody did anything wrong in that scenario. So if you're a Chinese official, are you running around grabbing up all of the logbooks at every single lodge? Why? Like, what's the point?
Why? What's the point? Exactly.
Even if he had gone to the lodge. If after that he had somehow, who knows, like stepped on some wrong thing and fell and somehow hurt himself and it couldn't be found. But the point is there's no wrongdoing. So why would you care?
Right. Right. And the hotel just said, I don't know. Police have it. Like they were very...
Well, sure. I'm sure the police...
Yeah. And so this kind of led to almost a desperation. So they started asking any worker they could find in the area if they recognized David. We're like, okay, we can't find his signature or his passport number anywhere, but does anybody recognize David? But they would come up empty-handed. In a later interview, the Sneddons admitted that at this point, they began to wonder if the police had told the guest staff not to answer any questions posed by David's family.
You have to assume that, right? At this point, I'm just trying to be logical, but like the reason why probably that guide was so forthright with his comments is because I'm sure the Chinese police didn't know anything about him.
Right.
It's just some people walking with him. Like they didn't know to go to him and say, don't say anything about seeing that guy. Who knows? I mean, that's probably what happened. They didn't know to even say anything, but the people at the staff, they probably were like, you don't need to be saying anything about that guy.
Well, I will tell you, this is not the last time you are going to hear about Guide Keith. So we'll see what happens with our friend Keith.
Oh boy.
Now, in David's last email to his parents, he mentioned how excited he was to be so close to Tibet while in Shangri-La. So the Sneddons knew that if he made it out of the gorge and past Tina's guest house, that's where he would go next. So that's the direction they traveled. Their next stop took them past Sean's guest house. And remember, Sean was actually their guide on this journey. They had a guide, they had an interpreter. Their guide was Sean. I don't know if it means anything to this investigation. I actually just think it's kind of neat to put the pieces together. But about 2 kilometers down the road from Sean's guest house, they encountered another witness who remembered David. This was confirmation they were on the right track. From there, they got on a bus for the 4-hour ride to Shangri-La. But to their disappointment, when they arrived, they couldn't find anyone that had seen David. And at this point, they were starting to feel pretty discouraged. They were running out of trail, and with that, the prospect of finding David was diminishing. The next day, Roy and James, as well as their guides, decided to check along the outskirts of the city, while David's brother, Michael, decided to explore the area of Old Town and Shangri-La. Now, remember, this is the main urban center with the shops and the restaurants and the guest houses. This is also the area where travelers can catch a bus back to Lijiang, which we know is where David had left his main backpack before he decided to hike the gorge. Michael said at this point, he was simply exhausted, and the concern about his brother's disappearance was overwhelming. So he sat on a bench in the city center to collect his thoughts. After a few minutes, he looked up and saw a restaurant named Yak Bar in front of him. I've heard some people say, what a weird name for a restaurant. Guys, this isn't yak like I have an upset stomach. It's yak like Y-A-K, like the animal. I know that is such a weird clarification, but I've heard several people say, what a weird name for a restaurant. So we're regular Disney goers.
Yeah. Yak and Yeti.
Yeah, there's a restaurant we go to called the Yak and Yeti that obviously represents the Himalayas. It made total sense to me. I saw Y-A-K right away. And also we're talking Tibet. Yak are a regular part of their lives. So Yak Y-A-K bar, just for clarification's sake. It turns out the Yak Bar was a cozy one-room Korean restaurant with wooden floors and pink walls and filled with Korean flags. It was located about 100 yards from a police station and a fairly large jail, and about 2 kilometers from the bus stop that David would have used to get back to Lijiang. Now remember, David loved all things Korean. He had lived in Korea for 2 years. So Michael said he had this feeling come over him that if David had ever been in Shangri-La, he would have gone into the Yak Bar. So, with his final bit of hope and courage, Michael stepped inside and met one of the owners. She was a woman in her 20s named Zhang Zofin. When she saw the photo of David, her face immediately lit up. As a matter of fact, she remembered him well. She described his clothing and said she was enchanted by the fact that he spoke both Mandarin and Korean. She told Michael that David visited the Yak Bar restaurant a total of 3 times over 2 days. She even remembered what he ordered to eat, saying because he was on a tight budget, he ordered cheaply. She recounted their conversations in Korean, which again would have made an impression. Zhang said she last saw him around noon on August 14th, when he stopped in for lunch and to say goodbye.
So 3 days after the official disappearance date.
And this would have fit the timeline because he was planning on being back to Lijiang by that evening.
Right. Okay.
And as a matter of fact, he communicated that to Zhang. He said he was headed to the bus stop to make it to Lijiang that evening. So this, again, for the Sneddons was confirmation that they were on the right track. This woman had the right information. They also knew, okay, he's been here. Like they felt they had real confirmation that he had made it into this restaurant.
Oh, I would say that's clear evidence that he was there. It's also clear evidence that he did not fall into the gorge.
Yes.
And the conclusion reached by the Chinese officials was incorrect.
Incorrect could mean a lot of different things in this situation.
I hear you.
Incorrect on many, many levels, but we'll leave that for now. They also met another tour guide in Shangri-La who remembered meeting David in the Snowland restaurant and coffee shop, and another woman who said David spent the night in her guest house. With the new information, they were able to zero in on the neighborhood and met even more people that remembered David. There were other employees and owners of neighboring shops that all remembered meeting the Westerner who spoke Mandarin and Korean. So at this point, it is our opinion sitting in this room that David made it out of the gorge, and it was also the Sneddons' opinion.
For sure.
He did not fall in the gorge. He did not drown. He did not have an accident on the trail. But here's the deal. That's great, but also where is he?
Right.
Because from Tina's guest house, the road splits in 2 directions. One route loops back to the trailhead, and the other continues on to Shangri-La. That's it. And they're already in Shangri-La. And what reason would David have to loop back to the trailhead to hike it again? That doesn't make any sense to me. Especially with his timeline to get back home.
Are you exploring the possibility that he would have taken the bus back and then gotten out at Tina's guest house and actually done the entire hike in reverse, keeping alive the possibility that he fell into the gorge? Is that what we're exploring right now?
Well, it's a theory. I can't say it's one that I hang my hat on.
Well, and further,
but those are the only options.
And
Either
the Chinese officials didn't hang their hat on it either.
Oh, well, that's exactly right. This is what I'm saying. All the people that saw David saw him during those 3 days. No one saw him after that. Does that make sense? So to me, that eliminates the possibility that he would loop back into the trail again. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Oh, agreed. I just was trying to clarify to make sure that wasn't something we were actually exploring because it didn't seem at all to make sense.
I
But
mean, I'm sure if you are just absolutely positive somehow you wound up in that gorge, I think the only way you could explain it at this point is to say he went back. But
mm-hmm.
I don't think that's very logical either.
No.
But if you are insistent that that's what happened to him, you would have to make his sightings make sense.
Right. Okay.
And that's kind of where we end as far as the sightings. After David walked out of that yak bar, no one saw him again.
Unbelievable.
And this is really where the search hit a dead end. There were no more tangible leads. So, out of options, David's family returned to Utah, where they set up a website, Finding David Sneddon. And this website is still active. They also have a very active Facebook page that you can join as well. But they summarized everything that they witnessed and everyone that they talked to in a 74-page report detailing their trip. They sent this report to the US State Department. Now, it was their belief that the governments, both the Chinese and American, would recognize their discoveries and proceed accordingly. Think about it. They had seen these people that are credible witnesses that believe they saw David. He made it out of the gorge. And in many ways, it almost seems irrefutable that he made it out of the gorge. However, no one responded to them. After several inquiries, their first response came via email. It was from Gavin Sundwall. He was a diplomat stationed at the embassy in Beijing, and he wrote that a special investigation unit had looked into the Sneddon's report and had not, quote, produced any tangible leads, end quote.
Of course.
Get ready to lose your mind. It would take another 8 months of relentless prodding on the part of the Sneddons to convince the Chinese to launch their own follow-up investigation and to interview the people who claim to have seen David.
I don't know. It's making me frustrated and it's making me angry. I mean, it's just like, okay. I mean, because their wonderful son is missing and nobody wants to help him. And it's just like
maddening.
Just atrocious.
8 months. They haven't even bothered to re-interview witnesses. Again, this family has done the legwork.
Right. A 74-page.
Just go talk to people.
They clearly went and found everybody.
Yes.
They clearly found where he went and everything.
Like, if they wanted to solve this case, it's basically been served to them on a silver platter, and they're like, no, thank you.
Right. No.
How else do you interpret this?
Yeah, exactly.
In an interview with news.com, Roy Sneddon said, quote, "We were, I suppose, naive. We had all these sightings we felt good about and went to Shangri-La. We said, hey, we have all this information they haven't shared with the police. It became evident they weren't going to do anything. The Korean cafe was about 100 meters from a police station. All they had to do was to walk down the street, and they didn't do it. The Chinese police are not incompetent." And I think that last sentence really brings into perspective what you and I are dancing around a little bit. Maybe not even dancing. Maybe we're just overtly saying it. This is more than just they're doing a poor job. Right. They are intentionally covering something up.
For sure.
Overlooking something. I'm still not sure exactly what it is, but it's intentional. What they are doing is intentional. These are intentional actions.
Yeah.
This isn't incompetency. Which
it certainly appears as such.
Yeah. I mean, incompetency is bad, but intentionally covering something up is far worse. David's mother, Kathleen, went a step further when speaking about the second Chinese investigation, if you can even call it that. She said those witnesses were, quote, terrified about what might happen to them if they spoke further. And Bart just gets more devastating from here, because when Chinese officials finally questioned the 12 witnesses, again, 8 months later, all 12 recanted their story. Ken Chung, the guide, said he couldn't be certain that the man he met on the trail was David. And at the yak bar, Zhang told police that the photo of David looked like a customer she met in August, but she wasn't sure if it was David. The same routine played out over and over. David's parents wondered if the witnesses were intimidating into recanting. I think yes.
Yeah.
And in the end, the Americans and the Chinese deemed the evidence, quote, inconclusive. end quote, determining again that David most likely died in Tiger Leaping Gorge.
Yeah, that's terribly frustrating. If you have one, you only have one person. Sure, I mean, you have to at least give that some credence, but 12? Nope.
Well, and especially Keith, the guide, and Zhang, the restaurant owner.
Yes.
They knew it was David.
Clearly. The guide was with him for like 4 hours. He clearly knew who he was.
Yeah, and he came in to that restaurant 3 times and literally came in just to say goodbye because they were friends.
And because the police didn't know of his existence and relationship, they hadn't gotten to him by the time he spoke to them.
Yep.
Nor had they gotten to the people in Shangri-La because they didn't realize he'd made it there.
And it's frustrating because in the Sneddon's effort to help, they basically handed them the people that they should go and say, shut your mouth.
Right. That's right. Which is so frustrating.
So frustrating. Now, before I go into more information, I'm going to go over a few theories that have been thrown out. The first theory is that David ran away to start a new life. Right. Several have mentioned maybe the fact that he was a Mormon. I mean, Mormonism can be really strict, and they thought maybe he needed to leave and start over. But none of this makes any sense to me. None of his actions indicated that he was planning to leave. Heck, even the fact that like $700 was still left in his bank account to me signals he wasn't planning on leaving. And David was excited about his senior year. Like, this is a guy that's excited about his life.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as a matter of fact, he had already prepaid for his student housing at BYU with his own savings. This is not a guy that's planning on disappearing.
Nope. No, he's not.
There's also the idea that maybe someone harmed him somewhere in Shangri-La. I mean, if you believe the report that he even never made it out of the gorge, maybe somebody killed him along the trail. Like, maybe it wasn't simply a slip and fall. Maybe somebody killed him and hid him somewhere.
You know, we don't have any evidence that occurred. But you know me, I'm going to look at it logically and say, okay, that is possible. And it could in some way explain why Chinese officials would make the story go away, because they don't want to look bad. They didn't want to look like an American tourist came there and got killed. I still think that's a stretch, but it's at least somewhat plausible. It doesn't sound like it's a place where that would have occurred.
Well, as a matter of fact, to the contrary, I mean, violent crime and especially murder is very rare. But is it possible? Yeah, I suppose it is.
That's what I'm saying. There's nothing we can sit here and go, no way. But can't say that, right? Because there's nothing that we don't have any evidence or anything that would say it couldn't happen. Because it could. It just sounds like it's not particularly likely.
Yeah, I think that's where I am on that theory too. So I will tell you, this is kind of where David's case sat for 7 years. No developments. That is until a man named Chuck Downs called David's parents and told them that he believed David had been kidnapped by North Korea and might still be alive. So lots of questions here. What the heck, right? Even the Sneddons were like, what? What are you even saying to us? Like, speak in English, sir. What are you even saying? Because at this point, they had just kind of accepted, okay, either David ran away or somebody murdered him. Like, this was not even on their radar.
Yeah, how could it be?
So big questions come to mind. Who the heck is Chuck Downs, and how the heck would he know that? Yeah. How the heck would he know that David's in North Korea? Secondly, what would North Korea want with a 20-year-old college student? And then lastly, how is it possible that David could have been abducted into North Korea when he's 1,700 miles away from their border?
That's what I was about to say. He's on the southern border of China. You're talking about North Korea. Really far away.
Far away, exactly. So I'm going to do my best to try to answer those questions. Chuck Downs is a former Pentagon official who worked on North Korean issues and went on to become the executive director for the Washington-based Committee for Human Rights in North Korea. Imagine that on a business card. It's quite the mouthful.
Yeah.
But a man who probably knows some things.
Right. This isn't keyboard jockey on Reddit.
Absolutely. Oh, look at you using a Reddit reference.
Oh yeah, that's definitely a reference to the last one I did. Yeah.
You're so hip.
I'm not, but
yeah. But Chuck Downs was able to get leaked information from inside the walls of North Korea. And this is where I unleash a ridiculous amount of unsettling information about North Korea. Apparently, North Korea has been kidnapping people for years. And not just like a couple people close to the border, but like a lot of people from all over the world. This is not a conspiracy or a witch hunt. These are true facts. And we know this because in 2002, North Korea admitted that they had been kidnapping Japanese people. Kim Jong il met with Japan's prime minister and acknowledged that he had indeed been abducting Japanese citizens throughout the 1970s and 80s, but he only admitted to a small amount of what he had actually been doing. Kim Jong il said North Korean agents had abducted 13 Japanese citizens for various purposes, including training North Korean spies in the Japanese language and culture. They literally kidnapped random people from beaches, right off the street, and even people who thought they were going to job interviews. They would meet them in other countries and take them.
It's just ludicrous. I mean, truly.
I am terrified.
It's just.
I am terrified.
It's ludicrous.
Now, after this revelation, Kim Jong il apologized and gave back 5 people. He said the others had all died, although many people doubt that was actually true. But even if they did, that's horrific as well. Now, when the 5 people came back, that's where we got a lot of information about what was actually happening in North Korea. The freed captives explained that North Korea was abducting people from lots of different countries, not just Japan, and these abductions were ongoing. Because remember, it was admitted to in the 70s and 80s, but they said they don't do that anymore. That was simply not true. It was proven that for years, North Korea has been abducting people from South Korea, Japan, Malaysia, Thailand, Romania, and France, along with substantiated rumors of kidnappings of many other countries. Abductees are kept in North Korea for a variety of reasons, including teaching language and culture and training spies. So there's an example of this spy training where they abducted a Japanese man. He taught them in all the Japanese cultures and language. So then the Koreans sent out their spy with a forged Japanese passport. This guy got on a plane and then blew up a bomb in Japan because he passed as a Japanese person.
Wow.
Yeah. So we're not talking about just spies. We're talking about people like terrorist type stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
A famous South Korean director, Shin Sang-ok, and an actress, Choi Yoon-hee, were even taken to help make more professional-looking propaganda films. Abducted from South Korea so that Kim Jong-il could make, actually it was his father, but could make better looking propaganda films.
Wow.
There is little information about what life is like in North Korea for kidnapped foreigners. Most of what we know, again, has come from those Japanese who have managed to escape or were released. But many are reluctant to speak for fear that North Korea could retaliate against their friends and family.
I mean, you have to say it's a valid concern.
Yeah, considering they were just plucked up off the street. No one knew where they were.
And you can imagine they probably told them when they released them, don't you say anything about what happened here, or otherwise you'll regret it, that kind of stuff. And they know that's probably a credible threat.
Well, even more than that, there is a great deal of brainwashing that goes on. So some people forget they were even kidnapped.
Wow.
Now, one of the best known cases of abduction involves Kaoru Hasuki and his then girlfriend Yukiko Okudo. In 1978, the pair wandered away from a crowd of beachgoers in Kashiwazaki City, Japan, onto a quiet stretch of sand where they held hands and watched the sunset. As they watched the waves, several men approached, and one asked for a cigarette lighter. Before either could answer, one of the men punched Hasuki in the face, while another tied his arms together, forced a gag into his mouth, and shoved him into a large sack along with Okudo. The men loaded their captives into an inflatable speedboat and raced away. The next time the couple saw land was 2 days later when they arrived in North Korea.
Unbelievable.
Hasuki was separated from Okudo and taken to a so-called guest house in a valley where he was surrounded by barbed wire fence and armed guards. During 24 years of captivity, Hosaki's captors forced him to read the teachings of Kim Il-sung and kept him hidden from other abductees, routinely moving him from one house to another. He was put to work as a translator, rewriting Japanese newspaper articles in Korean. After 2 years, he was reunited with Okudo and allowed to marry. The couple had a son and daughter and decided to lie to their children, telling them they were Korean so that others would not discriminate against them. Husaki said it was, quote, the longest and most bitter period of my life, end quote.
I would have to say that's probably correct.
Yeah, I accept that answer.
Yes.
The family was released in 2002 when Kim Jong-il admitted they were kidnapping people. So these were part of the group that he allowed to be released. But by this time, tremendous damage had been done. When Hasuke reunited with his family in Japan, he told his brother Toru that he was, quote, a citizen of North Korea, sent to Japan to normalize relations between two countries. So this is a very real example of brainwashing. He had no clue what had even happened to him. Now, there are no officially recognized cases of abducted Americans, but there are Americans that have nonetheless found themselves captives of North Korea. The first is the case of U.S. Army Sergeant Charles Jenkins. Are you familiar with his story?
No.
Okay, he's an American defector that was held in Korea for almost 40 years. And strangely enough, his case may be related to David's case. In 1965, Jenkins, who was also aged 24, was stationed at an outpost along the edge of a demilitarized zone between North and South Korea. On a cold January evening, after guzzling nearly a dozen beers, he set off as though going on his nightly patrol duty. Terrified of being sent to Vietnam, Jenkins told his supervisor that he was going to check out a strange noise and crossed into North Korea.
Oh boy.
Now, his plan, although very poorly thought out, was that he would get captured by North Korea, then sent to the Soviet Union because Soviet Union was North Korea's Cold War ally, and that eventually he would just get shipped back to the States. That did not happen.
I'm sure it didn't.
Jenkins later said, quote, I did not understand. Once someone goes there, they almost never ever get out, end quote. Jenkins was blindfolded and taken to a small house where North Korean soldiers interrogated him for 10 days. Afterwards, Jenkins was taken to another house and forced to live in a tiny bedroom. A 6-foot wall surrounded the house, and outside a guard kept watch. Jenkins wrote in his memoir, quote, I suffered from enough cold, hunger, beatings, and mental torture to frequently make me wish I was dead, end quote. Jenkins eventually began teaching English to North Korean soldiers. For many years, his lectures were recorded for others. He was forced to appear in anti-American propaganda films and television shows. All captive foreigners endured daily re-education and indoctrination classes. Prisoners were also engaged in mind control exercises that required them to admit their faults and pledge their allegiance to the supreme leader.
Yeah, straight out of the playbook of those types of states.
Absolutely. Now, arranged marriages were also a part of prisoner life. Jenkins was given a 20-year-old Japanese abductee as his bride in 1980. He said one night he heard a knock at the door and he opened it up and there she was.
Goodness.
Yeah. Interestingly, the two wound up bonding over their hatred of North Korea, and they subsequently produced 2 daughters.
Okay.
In 2002, his Japanese bride, Soga, was one of the 5 Japanese prisoners allowed to return home after Kim Jong-il admitted to their abductions. Back in Japan, Soga's story of her American husband and their children, still in North Korea, were taken up by the media, and on July 9th, 2004, North Korea released Jenkins and their 2 daughters.
Oh, that's great.
It is, but oh my gosh. Now, this may be a real coincidence, but David Sneddon disappeared a month after Jenkins' release.
Oh my gosh.
I just want that to soak in a moment.
Yeah, and he spoke Korean and Mandarin. And
Is that a pure coincidence? Maybe, but it's a weird
oh
coincidence.
my gosh.
So, for anyone slowly putting the pieces together, the rumor is that Kim Jong il put the word out that North Korea needed to find someone new to teach them English. But the question still stands, why David and how? And these answers may all come down to wrong time, right place. See, it was later verified that Tiger Leaping Gorge and the Yunnan province as a whole had become something of an underground railroad for citizens trying to escape North Korea. A network of safe houses and routes shielded defectors through China and into Southeast Asia. And this was important for escape because China was an ally of North Korea, meaning that China was assisting North Korea in capturing escapees and returning them to North Korea, where they would almost 100% be executed. But that's what they were doing. In addition, Chinese authorities were on the lookout because North Korean escapees were being aided by Christian activists from the West.
Okay.
The first theory goes that David may have been mistaken as a smuggler. He is a Christian activist from the West. I don't know about activists, but he's a white Christian from the West. It's possible that Chinese officials saw him speaking Mandarin and Korean and assumed he was helping escapees, subsequently detained him to be questioned by the North Koreans, who then just kept him.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the idea that word got out, again, that Kim Jong il needed a new English teacher. So maybe one of his Secret Service agents who were working along the Chinese authorities to capture these escapees in this underground railroad might have either noticed David or might have even been tipped off by a guest house owner, a shop owner, a restaurant owner, and they decided to abduct him to take him back to the supreme leader.
Oh yeah, that makes perfect sense.
It seems to be believed by most, at least on the Chinese side, that if this was done, it was done by a few like rogue Chinese agents. Like if the Chinese were involved, these would have been rogue agents that would have surrendered David. Like it wasn't done on an official capacity.
Oh, certainly.
If you're a low-level Chinese policeman and you can get paid off by finding this gem, then,
for sure.
I mean, it's possible.
Yeah, and the fact of the matter is China has been friendly to North Korea for decades.
Right, it's not shocking.
Right. They've been friends. They have been allies. And China has been essentially the state that propped them up in many ways for many, many years. So within China, North Korea isn't necessarily viewed the way we view them.
Right.
And in fact, they probably have a more positive opinion of North Korea than they do of America. And so,
well, in current situations, I would agree.
Notwithstanding,
yeah,
current events, but in like 2004, it probably was not a terrible thing to be like, yeah, I'll help out the North Koreans. You know? And he'll get a little bit of money and help them out.
Exactly. Now let's go back to Chuck Downs, the man who first called the Sneddons with this crazy theory. He learned about David's disappearance in 2011 after interviewing a Mormon lawyer who was familiar with David's case. Before then, he had never heard of David because David's death has been listed as an accidental fall and drowning. Like, what is there to investigate? Why on earth would he be in Korea? It's just so funny the way all the pieces kind of came together. And I say funny, I mean, it's fortuitous, miraculous. I don't know what it is that these people that could help each other, like David's story traveled, I guess, over these years.
Yeah.
After hearing multiple details in David's case, Chuck felt certain that this was a North Korean abduction. So he called David's parents, who were at first a little skeptical, but definitely willing to listen. After hearing what Chuck had to say, the Sneddons traveled to Washington, D.C. and met with the Committee for Human Rights along with other families of abductees. After hearing all the stories, the Sneddons were once again hopeful their son could be alive, but they still needed proof.
Yeah, but just having hope that he's alive is huge. I mean,
huge.
I know I would be, even if he's in North Korea, if he's alive, there is a hope.
Absolutely. Of the idea of her son's abduction, Kathleen Sneddon told reporters, quote, "It's hard to wrap your mind around the idea that a nation state might have picked up your kid from a foreign country. But after the conference, we thought it might be a 75% chance. The North Korea thing was just a puzzle piece that seemed to fit.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with her.
Yeah, I agree.
When asked what she thought about the Chinese theory of David falling and drowning in the gorge, Kathleen answered, quote, "There's no evidence of that. Zero." She added that David was, quote, "the only American missing in China since World War II whose body has not been found and whose whereabouts remain unknown," end quote. That is a significant fact.
For sure.
Then in May of 2012, the Tokyo nonprofit National Association for the Rescue of Japanese Kidnapped in North Korea,
Yeah.
also a mouthful, and one of their sources, who was a North Korean defector who had previously provided flawless intelligence, obtained documents that in August of 2004, a 23 or 24-year-old American studying at a Chinese university was arrested in Yunnan province on charges of helping illegal residents. According to the documents, authorities released the American in September, and he'd ended up in the hands of North Korean agents who were in the area searching for defectors. So kind of the theory that was already floating around, but it totally takes China out of the hot seat.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, well, we released him. Whatever happened to him after that, we don't know.
Of course.
Then in June of 2012, a man with close ties to the North Korean defector community said an American in his early 30s who matched David's description was teaching English outside Pyongyang, North Korea's capital.
Absolutely.
If there's someone that looks like him there, it's probably him.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Now, with what they felt was evidence of an abduction, the Sneddons started reaching out to the U.S. government, again asking for help. They wrote letter after letter. The number I last saw reported was 50 letters, but I'm sure it was much more after that. They also met with members of the State Department, including Hillary Clinton, but the U.S. was pretty much unresponsive. In November 2012, a friend of the Sneddon family filed a Freedom of Information Act request with the State Department for all records relating to David. Though the report request was for 14 documents, the government refused to release 13, citing concern for privacy and the, quote, interest of national defense and foreign relations, end quote. The one document they did release simply stated that China had not found any trace of David.
Mm-hmm.
So frustrating.
Yes, absolutely.
While the Sneddons couldn't get the U.S. on board, they did find help through other sources. On September 1st, 2016, 4 years after they learned their son might be in North Korea, David's parents got another break. A Seoul-based advocacy group for South Korea abductees in North Korea received even more information about David, and this time it was extremely detailed. A credible anonymous source said that David was kidnapped and taken to North Korea, where he became Kim Jong-un's personal English teacher. So Kim Jong-il had kidnapped him and had him teach his own children.
Yeah.
This source also said they gave David the North Korean name of Yoon Bong-soo, and he has a wife named Kim Eun-ha. They have 2 children, a boy and a girl, and they were living in a special area near the capital called an invite-only zone, which is a contained area where they kept a lot of people they kidnapped, and this was essentially to keep them from escaping. Now, this informant also added that since the information had been released, David and his family were moved to a more remote area about 160 kilometers north of Pyongyang, where he is under increased surveillance. David was also spotted at Pyongyang Red Cross Hospital and the Mother Church in Pyongyang.
Wow. You have to think, with all of that, not just circumstantial evidence, but possibly even a little bit of direct evidence there. Wow. Unbelievable.
Despite this testimony, the official position of the United States and Chinese government is still that David died after falling into the Jingsha River after hiking Tiger Leaping Gorge, even though his body has never been found. Listen to this mania. I think most people aware of David's story at this point would say the investigation into his disappearance by the officials was lacking.
Yeah.
Despite the Sneddons repeatedly asking to see the guest house ledgers or any notes from eyewitness interviews, the U.S. Embassy in Beijing told the family they couldn't release any other information about David's case without David's permission because of privacy laws.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. When confronted with this new evidence during the Obama administration, North Korea denied having David. They called the idea far-fetched, which I add, is it? Is it really? They also said the U.S. was just trying to tarnish their reputation. Oh, Crimea River.
Yeah.
Like, how can you admit to kidnapping and then be upset when someone accuses you of a kidnapping?
Right.
It's like, really?
Yeah.
Really?
Like they're worried about their reputation anyway.
Now, there are also issues on the American side. David is currently not on any list of American detainees in North Korea. Senator Mike Lee and Congressman Chris Stewart, both from Utah, have been campaigning since 2016 to get him on the list, but have not been successful. Isn't this weird?
Wow. That's what I kept thinking when you were talking about when they tried to get Americans involved. What are their senators? And I mean, Utah senators.
They're trying.
Like what are they doing? I would be flipping out about it.
They are. They absolutely are. Senator Mike Lee said, quote, "The more I learned about this case, the more I become convinced there's a possibility that we could find him. And as long as that possibility remains, I want to keep investigating."
There you go. I mean, that's what I would hope to hear from my senator.
Absolutely. The senator and congressman recently sent a combined letter to President Trump urging him to probe North Korea. Here's an excerpt from that letter. Quote, "Research from regional experts has uncovered disturbing parallels between David's disappearance and the known operational patterns of kidnapping of citizens from many countries, including our close allies, Japan and South Korea, conducted by North Korean security agents in East Asia over the past 4 decades." End quote.
Yeah, I hope something's done.
Well, nothing's been done yet.
Not yet.
I want to talk about why you think the United States might not want to be involved.
Tarnishing China. Like in the past, like I don't know that is much of an issue in, we referenced current events a little while ago. I think perhaps in the current state of affairs, they may not care as much. And the current president may not care as much. I think perhaps past administrations may have cared because China they didn't want to be implicated because China said, look, we investigated and he disappeared. And if you say something otherwise, then what you're saying is that we were in cahoots and did this, or had some kind of involvement or whatever. China probably made it clear, we don't want you to take the official position that we were involved with this. And there's no way around that, really. I can't imagine that the officials care what North Korea thinks of us. I mean, we have an openly very hostile relationship with North Korea. And I just can't imagine that it's any particular issue with saying, impugning them or whatever. But China is a very tricky relationship. Always has been. So that to me has to be why. Hence the release of 1 out of 14 documents. The other 13 probably were internal documents that said the Chinese knew about this, and the Chinese either turned a blind eye or were somewhat or even fully complicit, who knows, with transferring David over to North Korean custody.
You know what I was thinking, especially during that time period, weren't nuclear weapons negotiations kind of a thing during that time?
With China?
No, with North Korea.
Oh, yeah, that's always been a thing. They have always been trying. The various leaders of North Korea have spent like half their GDP on like developing anything they can that would give them the ability to reach out and actually hurt Japan or the United States or, their big enemies. So we've always had negotiations with them. I just can't.
So you don't think this would have like tipped the scale or anything? I mean, us accusing them and saying, hey, I think you have one of our citizens. I mean, of course they're going to deny it, but you could at least ask. Like, I just don't understand why the United States isn't like, hey, we have some pretty good intelligence here that one of our own is living with you.
I'm not going to rule out that there were some considerations in terms of maintaining the relationship with North Korea or
but you think this was maybe more to spare China?
To me, that makes more sense.
Okay.
Or both. Spare China and, if there were particularly sensitive negotiations going on that America thought might bear fruit in terms of limiting North Korea's weapons proliferation, perhaps that was taken into account. But I just don't think anyone really gives any credibility to North Korea's leadership to suggest that, oh, we're going to make this deal with them. Basically, Trump figured out, remember, he was just like, the only thing that this guy responds to is just brute force. Like, you just have to say to him, if you do that, I'm going to just blow you to pieces. And that's essentially, from what I understand, that's the only thing that they're really going to listen to anyway, in terms of negotiation. But anyway, that is so frustrating to me.
Well, and the Sneddons, I mean, David's family absolutely echoed that sentiment in a way I will never be able to understand the level of frustration they must have. In one interview with the media, Michael Sneddon said the lack of participation on the side of the U.S. was because, quote, it's simply more convenient for the United States if David is dead, end quote.
Right.
What a sad truth that is.
I know, but that's true of many people that end up in situations in foreign countries. But the Department of State exists, at least in part, to deal with those situations. Of course, it's inconvenient when people end up in this. So it doesn't mean you don't deal with it. I understand his point, and he's right. That's the position they've essentially taken here, which I disagree with.
Right.
Wholeheartedly.
Right. And I think the majority of U.S. citizens would disagree with this position.
Absolutely.
Figure it out.
Any American, that hears this story is going to say, no way. And I'm certainly one of those. And put me in that camp.
Right. And I recognize that North Korean abductions for America isn't top priority. This isn't something that we have to deal with frequently, but I will tell you, it is considered a top international human rights issue in Japan right now. Since the Korean War in 1953, North Korea is suspected to have abducted 3,824 South Koreans. And this is beyond the one...
South Koreans or Japanese?
South Koreans.
South Korean.
And this is beyond the 100,000 Koreans taken during the war. They were also suspected to have taken as many as 100 Japanese people, according to the U.S. Committee for Human Rights in North Korea.
It's like a criminal group or something.
Yeah, that's kind of what they're like a mafia or a mob or something.
Well, it's like we all live in this sort of societal construct that we rely upon, which includes laws and includes the concept that no one's above the law, right? I mean, if somebody has a lot of money, they still have to follow up. You've got $1 billion in the bank. You can't go shoot somebody, or you can't go kidnap someone, in theory. I mean, I know people get away with things around the world, but I'm saying the law does apply to them. You start talking about nation states, particularly a nation state with a substantial military, and they are not concerned about their reputation within the geopolitical world. They'll just do this stuff. So there was a story you and I talked about. I just told this to you. That is apparently a true story. 2005, Robert Kraft, and some of you may know him, Kraft, the company, he's a billionaire. He owns the New England Patriots football team. He's over in St. Petersburg, Russia in 2005 with some other big hitter, very wealthy people who had an audience with Vladimir Putin. So they're at this meeting with him. Talking. This is
before Ukraine and all that kind of stuff.
Before that. So this was when he was still kind of in the mainstream or accepted on the world stage. So they meet with him, and Kraft had this Super Bowl ring from the New England Patriots that just won the Super Bowl. And he shows it to Putin, hands it to him. And Putin looks at it and he's like, yeah, okay. And he just puts it into his pocket. And Kraft tries to say, hey, listen, I'd like that back. And Putin turns around and walks out behind these curtains, and 3 of his KGB kind of guys just step in and are like, don't go any further. And they were just like, no. And he just walked away. He kept it. So to this day, it literally has Kraft's name engraved inside of it. It's like a $25,000 jewel-encrusted Super Bowl ring, which is worth well more than $25,000 because it's an actual Super Bowl ring. He just walked away with it. To me, that's an example of, you have that kind of power. The rules that apply to almost everybody just don't apply to you. In the case of Putin, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Call the police? File a report? It's just a ring in that case. Here you have a human life, but it just shows you that when you talk about nation states, it sort of exits what we normally think of as a legal society. And this is clearly, to me, that. Because North Korea doesn't have any options, it's not like they can put it on, like I said earlier, you can't go out and say, we're just going to hire somebody. We're going to hire someone who speaks Korean and English, who's from the West, to come and live here and be the translator. Because exactly 0 people are going to do that. So they're like, okay, then just go kidnap them. I mean, that's what they did. And that's what they've been doing.
Well, it's just the idea that there's no accountability. I hate it. Like, everything in my psyche is like,
right, because
no, that's not correct. That's not correct.
You can call the police all you want. You can
Right.
call that. You can make a report. You can literally go to the government, Hillary Clinton, that level of government, and
Yes.
say, "Look what's happened here." And there's effectively nothing you can do about it unless literally someone like the president himself says, "Hey, you got this guy, and I want him back.
Yeah. Okay, we're done.
We're done. I
Yeah.
want him back."
Yeah.
He sends Marco Rubio or something and just says, "This is important to me. Go make it happen." Then it'll happen. But outside of that, there's nothing you can do about it. It's completely unlike most criminal cases.
Right. Kind of segueing off of Putin just absconding
Yeah.
with a Super Bowl ring.
Mhm.
There was the case of Otto Warmbier, which I didn't include in my notes, but he was a 20-year-old college student who went to North Korea. Why you would just decide to go to North Korea, I don't know. Apparently, you can just travel to North Korea. But he was there, and as a souvenir, he decided he was going to pocket a propaganda poster. It didn't go well for him. So he was arrested at Pyongyang airport and he was convicted. I can't remember what they labeled the crime, but it was basically for taking this propaganda poster. And he was sentenced to 15 years of hard labor for taking this poster.
Ugh.
His family got a call 15 months after he was put in this prison and said he was in a coma. They said at that time it was a combination of botulism and sleeping pills. That's what the North Korean officials said. And they allowed his family to take him. How benevolent of them. So he returned to the United States. They wound up having to take him off life support after 6 days. There was nothing that they could do. We still don't exactly know what happened to him. Clearly, his brain was deprived of oxygen for some reason. We're not really sure if it was botulism. We're not sure if it was trauma. We're not sure if it was torture. We have no idea what it was. His family was so traumatized by it that they didn't even want to do an autopsy. There was no external evidence of trauma, but who knows what happened.
Oh, yeah.
And at this point, they just said lay him to rest. So we don't exactly know what happened. But as a result of this, there was a trial against North Korea who was found guilty of Otto Warmbier's death in absentia, of course. I mean, because no one was there. There was no response from North Korea at all. So here, they're guilty of causing or at least negligent in his death. But so what? So what? What are you going to do?
Yeah, exactly.
It's just so maddening. So maddening.
Absolutely.
Okay, back to David's case.
Okay.
Now, the Sneddons have recognized that because of the value David brings to the North Koreans, he's probably safe-ish, even if he was abducted, as far as they're not going to kill him because of what he can do for them.
Yeah, I mean, he's essentially, he's not irreplaceable, but he's a very, very difficult replacement for them if something were to happen to him. They probably try to keep him as happy as they can under the bizarre circumstances that he's being held. He's being held captive, but he's a resident of this totalitarian state.
Right.
He can't be replaced.
Well, not easily. You got to go and steal somebody.
Right. The leadership in North Korea, he would have to go and find a guy just like him and kidnap him again, is what they would have to do.
Right. And so far, they've been able to get away with this one.
Right.
Since, 2004?
Just unbelievable, but...
Yeah, exactly. Even though David's mother, Kathleen, admits that David is in a difficult situation, and I think difficult is probably an understatement at this point, she did go on to say, quote, "If any one of our children had to be abducted and cope with the difficult situation, it's David. He has a great personal belief, and on the inside, he is very strong," end quote.
Sounds like really just an amazing guy, and I truly feel for his parents. Now, I guess at least it's better if he's alive and they know that he's alive. Now, granted, they don't have any true confirmation at this point. It certainly sounds like it's him.
It certainly sounds like it's him. If I am Roy and Kathleen right now, I am hanging on to the hope that even if it's a thread of hope, that is him, that he offers enough value to North Korea that they treat him relatively well. He has a wife. He has children. I imagine he probably eats and lives better than most of the commoners in North Korea.
Yeah, he probably does.
Granted, his life looks very different than any other Westerner. Not having any individual liberties or freedoms, no way to, he's a practicing Mormon, or at least he was. And that is a thing of his past right now.
Well, yeah, it's just not possible at least in the manner of worship that you would think of.
That's true.
I'm sure his parents hope that he's able to maintain that connection and worship within himself. But gosh, what a very, very difficult situation he's in.
Yeah. His family said they hope that David could be a blessing to the people of North Korea, which, oh my gosh. I mean, all this is just so humbling,
Yeah,
right?
I can't say I'd be saying anything like that.
Well, what else can you say, really?
Yeah.
After hearing about his wife and children, the Sneddon said they realized he might not be able to leave because he wouldn't want to leave his wife and his children.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they give you brides.
That's right.
That's why they provide the abductees with brides. It's not to be generous. It's to give you a reason to stay, not only because it gives you more fulfillment, I would imagine, also because they know you're not going to leave your family if we threaten to kill your family. We've already said, even if he is there, in the best of circumstances, he's in a compound surrounded by barbed wire with armed guards watching him.
It was terrible.
That's the best case scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, they're not going to kill him, but he's certainly not going to go anywhere. Now, let's talk about what we can actually do to help David.
Mm-hmm.
Assuming David is alive and in North Korea, it's going to take a tremendous amount of effort to get him home because he is so valuable to them. And because this has been a situation for 20 years and no one from the Chinese government or the American government has really stepped up to do very much. So we need to start by spreading awareness. You can post on your social media accounts to get David's name in the public eye. This is a case I feel like is right in your wheelhouse, but you weren't really familiar with it.
That's correct.
You can also contact your local media, see if they will cover David's story. In addition, you can go to usa.gov/elected-individuals and search for your representative so you can contact them about David Sneddon.
Mm-hmm.
While Roy Sneddon is concerned about his own son, in a recent interview, he suggested that all Americans should be concerned about the, quote, bigger picture, end quote. Kathleen added, quote, "We as a family are concerned, of course, about David, but our hearts, our thoughts, our prayers go out to all the people of North Korea who've been held in subjection without freedoms, without adequate normal essentials for living a pleasant life, food, clothing, housing. We just feel all of North Korea needs to have something happen there, and we would hope that somehow David being released could help this."
Yeah, that's a wonderful statement, and I certainly agree.
Well, Bart, that's it.
Yeah, incredible. Yeah, from the beginning, where you come from on it, and a guy on a college mission trip doing some hiking and ends up in this situation. It is certainly appears the circumstantial evidence and all these other sort of people in a position to know saying that he's there. Not to mention the unbelievable timing of the former translator being released, and then they go and nab David a month later. I think all of it points to very solid evidence that he's there. I really hope that significant material actions are taken by the U.S. government to try to get him and his family out.
I absolutely agree. I mean, I think this could happen. You know, a good number of the stories we cover on the Dark Oak, I don't know if they'll ever be solved. This is one I think could be solved.
Yeah, for sure.
And solved, I'm not going to say easily. This is going to be difficult, but it can be done. I think it's going to be the highest levels of government are going to have to take notice and get involved.
For sure.
But it can happen. And if we say his name enough, I think we could really make it happen. I think this is one that's worth exploring and worth our time for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. I do want to turn it around and tell you very briefly about our branch of hope for the month of April. Futures is on a mission to stamp out domestic violence. I'm going to tell you specifically about their children's program. They have reported that at least 1 in 7 U.S. children experienced child abuse and neglect in the past year. They also reported that 15.5 million children in the United States witness domestic violence each year. And by the age of 17, more than 1/3 of our children have been exposed to it. But it doesn't have to be this way. There are interventions and solutions that will keep kids safe. Futures Without Violence works with healthcare providers to recognize and respond to the signs of abuse and work to educate parents and caregivers on how to help traumatized children, including children that are exposed to violence. Further, they work to stop it before it starts. They have programs to help promote healthy relationships, to break the cycle of violence, and keep every child safe from abuse, neglect, and exposure to violence. We invite you to learn more about Futures Without Violence on our webpage, thedarkoak.com, our Instagram account, The Dark Oak Podcast, or you can go directly to futureswithoutviolence.org. If you would like to join our Patreon, we would love to see you over there. You get some amazing content, and you know that your dollars are going to better your community. If you have any questions about Futures Without Violence or our involvement with that program, we would love to hear from you on our Instagram account. We'd also love to hear any questions or comments you have about today's episode. Thank you guys so much for all the love. We will be back in our next episode with Cynthia. So excited to have her back. Thank you, Bart, for being with us here today. I hope we made David proud. Thanks, Shiver Seekers. Bye-bye. This episode of The Dark Oak was created, researched, written, recorded, hosted, edited, published, and marketed by Cynthia and Stephanie of Just Us Gals Productions, and made possible by you, our shiver-seeking listener. Special thanks goes to Justice Himes for our incredible artwork and Ryan Crete for our amazing music.